mindfulness ends. And so I'm going to be talking about astrology in that way. There's lots of types of astrology, and different types of astrology can give you different things, like electional astrology giving you the best time to start something, or mundane astrology giving you really cool things to look at in history. Horary astrology, answering specific questions. I am not talking about those things. I am talking about natal astrology and my practice of it and what it gives us. Okay, let's jump in. So the number one thing that I love about astrology and what it can offer us is a non-pathologizing language for understanding ourselves. So what do I mean by that? Well, pathology is the language of sickness. And so often when we're moving through the world, if we do something in an atypical way, so say we communicate and people don't like the way we do it, or right, we struggle in relationships, or we struggle in business, in our careers, in our homes, right? All of these areas where we experience problems. And to some extent, everyone is going to experience at least minor challenges in all of those spaces. But the world likes to sort us into being defective in some way. Okay, you struggle in relationships, and so we're going to diagnose you with this, or right. And it's not just the mental health world, but I'm from that world, so I'm speaking about it in that way, right? That you are atypical in these ways, and we are going to devalue you or put you into a hierarchy and sort you in terms of your healthiness or being functional in these ways. And so what I love about astrology is that it does not do that. It takes those pieces, and astrology is not a hierarchy, right? We can view the signs, the progression of the zodiac signs as a reaction to each other, as a natural cycle, but it's not like Aries is the bottom of the stairway and you progress to Pisces and then you're done and you've achieved all these things, right? It's, the signs are different flavors. And so having different planets in different signs can explain why, right? Maybe it's really hard for you to talk about your emotions. Maybe it's really hard for you to think about them. Maybe it's really hard for you to trust other people, or maybe you get really afraid in professional situations. And so all these things that cause anxiety or depression or shame or the sense of not belonging or the sense of not being normal are reflected in our birth charts. And so, right, in your birth chart, you didn't do anything. I mean, I think right, it's not your fault. Your birth chart is not your fault, right? Different astrologers will make different claims about, and I think it's really helpful to think that we had some agency in choosing our birth chart, because I think that's a more empowered stance. But, right, it's not your fault, anything in your birth chart, right? It just independently, it's just a moment in time. It's just math. It's just physics. It's just science. And so it's an objective reflection. And so, right, there's things that I can feel shame about. Feel like maybe I'm too codependent in relationships. And then I look at the seventh house, the place of relationships, and I see different planetary placements there. I see different signatures there. And suddenly, right, this thing that I had shame about because it seemed, more extreme than normal becomes, it can become a lesson. It can become a really fertile ground for experience. It becomes something unique about me. And what that gives us is the ability to make choices about it, right? Besides the choice to try and suppress or repress or change ourselves, right? So that I think is really important, because we can begin the work of accepting ourselves, not as we are, not like never change, not like, right? But, in some ways it gives us permission to be ourselves without having this language of, okay, you're yourself, but you have whatever. You're yourself, but you have depression. And normal people don't have depression. And so you're different than normal. And so people have to make accommodations for you. And right? No, 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 no. Astrology doesn't use that language. And I think in that way, it invites us back home to ourselves, because there's not attachments of this makes you less valuable, this makes you less good. The second thing that astrology gives me that I really appreciate is a framework for understanding other people and not taking their behavior personally. So, right, so everything that I just said about how we understand ourselves through our own natal astrology is just as true for how we relate to other people. So, some examples of how this can work. You know, I am in a relationship with somebody, and this is just hypothetical. This is not my actual relationship. I'm in a relationship with somebody, and I feel like we never quite connect. I never really feel at home with them. I never really feel that emotionally bonded with them. Well, I, as an astrologer, but also just as a person, are going to look at moon signs. How compatible are your moons? How close can you get, right? It can be someone who it's just really hard to get close to them because, whatever, they have a moon conjunct Saturn in the 12th house, which doesn't make it, right, impossible. It just means that right now, suddenly the issue is not the integrity of the relationship. It's not how they feel about me. It's about, this person. It's hard for that to happen, or especially with Mercury. So how well does your Mercury communicate with somebody, and what style of communication, right? Fire sign Mercuries are going to go really, really fast. Water sign Mercuries are going to be less verbal. They're going to be more imaginative. They're going to be moving more slowly. Earth Mercuries are going to want things simple and practical. And air Mercuries are going to be all over the place. And the joy and the love of the communication. And then, right, then we can see the different sign placements and aspects that are obviously going to affect all of that. But, right, it doesn't become like someone willfully misunderstanding you, or that someone just, right, like you can stop blaming the other person for being the way that they are, in the same way that you can stop being, wishing that you were different in the view of natal astrology. So I think that, right, that in our relationships with other people, astrology is invaluable because it is really respectful of diversity, and not like capital D diversity necessarily, right? All academic lineages have a tremendous amount of work to do in that area. What I mean is that, right, if you're having trouble communicating with somebody, or if someone is stuck on something that you don't think is a problem, right? Astrology gives you a framework for understanding that without judging them on it, in such a way that we can be patient and we can be compassionate with other people. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, astrology gives me kind of a developmental timeline for my life. So what do I mean by that? I mean, by using planetary cycles, by using cycles of the progressed moon, there's many different timing techniques in astrology. I kind of get the sense of, where I am, what should be happening, what will happen, right? It frees me from one thing, from the illusion that everything's just going to stay the same, that if I just am doing the right thing and figure out all the right things, and everything's just going to go swimmingly in a straight line forever. So, right, we have these ideas of developmental things that we should be meeting, and we have them as children, right? You should learn to read by this age. You should go through adolescence and puberty in this age, right? But you don't stop changing when you become an adult. You don't stop changing at 21 or wherever, right? Our psychologies are still going through developmental motions, right? When we become parents, our brains change, our behaviors change. When we move through our careers, we change. And so astrology can be really helpful in saying, like, you know, because we can look at anyone's life and we can look at the cycles of the outer planets, and we can know that the Saturn return happens between 27 and 29. And so when you're in it, you know, and it feels like things are falling apart, and or you're feeling lonely, or, you know, you feel like, yeah, I mean, the Saturn return can be experienced in different ways, but right, we kind of have this expectation that those things are going to happen. So then we're not resisting our experience, we're not running away from it. We can get curious about what is actually there. And we can have those kind of expectations. So, right, so just very loosely, post-adolescence, we get the nodal return happens when you're 18. You kind of get on track. Okay, here's the story of how my life is going to go. Here we go. And then we have the Uranus, the first Uranus square that happens around 21. Okay, things did not go. Who am I? Who am I as an individual? And we start working on that. And then we have our progressed lunar return around 27 and our nodal opposition around 27, where we start taking ourselves seriously as an adult. Hopefully, we understand that the story as written is maybe not all it's chalked up to be, or we just feel like we've kind of got to the end of our expectations of what was going to happen, and suddenly we have to write the story for ourselves. We have our Saturn returns where we have to make big commitments about who we are going to be as individuals in the world. And then we move forward, and at 36, we have our first square with our Saturn return. We also have our second nodal return. So the nodes are back on. Hopefully we're kind of hopefully we have the feeling that we're getting back on track and that we've committed to the things that we've committed to in our Saturn return. And then we run into, at around 42, 43, it kind of depends on which generation you're in, we have the Uranus opposition at the same time as the Saturn opposition, and we have this huge surge of energy in our life. And sometimes it looks like a midlife crisis, and sometimes it looks like a revivification. And so you can kind of go through all the years of your life kind of looking at this and understanding that these periods of upheaval are developmental, that it's not just chaos. So that can be really helpful as well. So that's number 3 of things that astrology helps us with. Number 4, this one sounds a little bit weird. A sense of your own limitation. And so, right, when we get a sense of who we are, and we look at the birth chart and we see some of the signatures, and we start interpreting them, and we understand where probably the focus of our individual lives is going to happen, which we can get from looking at the houses that are really strongly represented in our charts in a number of ways. We also see that, right, like not everything is going to be a big deal, right? Some people's charts are all about career. Some people's charts are all about relationships. Some people have a sampling of everything, right? But we get the sense that, right, we are limited. And that's ultimately the lesson of Saturn, the lesson of time, the lesson of being in our kind of earthly experience, right? And that hopefully, as we go through this project of being alive, we come to understand that too as a gift. And so with my own sense of that and understanding kind of where my focus is, it frees me from the idea that I need to be focusing on everything. And it also gives me a lot of gratitude for other people, and creates a sense that I belong in the world with a ton of people that have a bunch of different gifts and a bunch of different focuses, and that what somebody else prioritizes does not need to be what I prioritize, and that that I am a participant. I'm not the whole. I'm not the hero. I'm not the greatest. I'm just part of a world of mortal forms, and people, and that both that I belong and that I'm not the be all end all of everything. I'm not the totality. And so, right, that limitation is a space of grace for us to just do our part and live our life and not feel this tremendous pressure to take care of everything, to learn everything, to champion every cause, to fix every problem, to have all of our lives fully developed at once. And I think as a part of that, there's also, right, I think in the culture we have this dominant narrative that you should figure out who you are and then you should just be that, and that you should be able to fully live into yourself, and then that's it, and you've completed yourself. But in the sense that natal astrology gives you a birth chart that's just a snapshot of time that has different dimensions, right? The fact that we can see the cycles starting long ago and that they will continue long after we pass out of life, you're never going to be complete. You're never going to finish yourself. You're never going to run out of material. You're never going to finish the work that you are, right? And I think that means that in many ways that are very important, you will always be imperfect, right? Hopefully you achieve things that make you feel really satisfied and that you accomplish something and that you're proud of. I'm not saying that, but right, you may write the book that you want to write, but never heal your relationship with your mother, right? You may have a wonderful partnership, but you may have these mental blocks that mean that you are the mother that your kids can't talk to, right? We accomplish things, and often the bigger things we accomplish, the more we are absent or lacking in other major areas of our lives. And the more that we are going to let down significant people in significant ways. And you know what? If we decide that we're not going to let down those people, then we might choose to miss out on some of our life's work. And that is a completely valid choice. But you cannot do it all. You cannot have everything. You are limited, and that's okay. But it's so frustrating. So astrology helps me sit with that truth as well. And then number 5 is, and I think this is really connected to all of those things, right, is a sense of purpose, a sense of my role, a sense of belonging. And it's kind of a map of those things. And what it helps me do is kind of turn my attention to specific areas of the chart or specific archetypes in my life at different moments. And so, right, and trust that that's all about the path that I am on. So it gives me a sense of purpose. The sign of the midheaven can talk a lot about our purpose. One thing that I really love about whole sign house is that the midheaven moves around. And so it can say, right, it doesn't need to all be 10th house stuff. It can be 11th house stuff. It can be 9th house stuff. Maybe you really come alive in studying. Maybe what is going to feel the most powerful for you is connecting with community. Maybe if it's in the 12th house, it is undergoing some real difficulties. And so what does all of this give us? What is kind of the one reason why I'm here? Well, I think the underlying thing is that astrology actually, and perhaps paradoxically, gives us choices, because it shows kind of what we have available to us in our toolbox. And so, so we don't spend our lives wishing that, that we had an Aries Mars when we have a Libra Mars. Instead, we pay attention, we listen to ourselves, and we gain the flexibility to respond to things with this framework. And I think that it's compassionate towards ourselves, and I think that it's compassionate towards other people. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back with more content.